This is Lynn. She'd like to tell us how she feels about the Big Green Gathering.
Hi. Hello. When we first heard the rumours that the Big Green Gathering was going to close down, or be closed down, we heard about fire certificates and highway closures and things that the Big Green Gathering might or might not have done, and whether they had enough money to pay up front for the security and all sorts of things of this nature. However, it does seem that as we get further into the dynamics of it all, there is quite a lot of very interesting coincidences that happened. For example, the highway closure. Now, as far as I understand it, Mendip Council requested, quite reasonably, that there should be a highway closure, as there has been in the past, many a time, no doubt. But when the Green Gathering applied for this highway closure, it was not forthcoming. Now, whether it was refused or whether it just didn't arrive, I'm not quite sure. But it's interesting that the Highways Department answers to the newly Conservative Somerset County Council. Another thing was the fire certification. However, I have heard that there was a perfectly adequate firm, Midland Fire I think it was called, who were engaged on the fire certification. Maybe they didn't present it in quite the same format as the previous firm had done, but not something that you couldn't sort out, not really the fault of the Big Green Gathering even. And then there was the security. And really, this is where we come into the whole nub of the matter. Now, a couple of years ago, Mendip Council granted a licence to the Big Green on condition that they had Stewards Security. And Stewards Security really were obtrusive in the Green Gathering. I was doing astrology there, and I was reading right on one of the edge of the fields, and every 15 or 20 minutes there would be a Land Rover, vroom, shattering all sense of atmosphere, all sense of cosy little reading, and always on the lookout for something being wrong all the time. It made me really uncomfortable, and many of us complained about that. However, that all sort of shrank into insignificance because of the hole that the Big Green Gathering had got itself into that year. Interestingly enough, that was also to do with Stewards Security, because Stewards Security, as far as I remember, cost £220,000. And I believe that the police refused to do the outside work in shutting the roads and everything unless they were able to have inside officers who had to be paid. Not quite sure of the ins and outs of that story, but I do know that it cost £60,000 for the police. Now, that's £280,000, over £250,000, before you even put your foot on a blade of grass. This is ridiculous. How can ordinary people be expected to produce this sort of money? It's absolutely insane, and I think that it is done deliberately. It was the Licensing Act that came in the spring of that year that made it mandatory for all sorts of levels of security to be met. Now, these guys who do security have insurance to do London clubs and all sorts of riots, and they have to have insurance that covers them for all these really dangerous jobs that they do. However, you could hardly say that policing the big green gathering was a very dangerous occupation. And yet, you couldn't have a security firm that didn't have this comprehensive insurance. So, the alternative scene, along with everybody else who does outside events and who doesn't actually have any problem with them, had to get all this extra security, and it cost a fortune. Not only did it cost a fortune in actually paying for the stuff to be done, but in actually finding out exactly what it was that you had to do, all the preparation of goodness knows how many bits of paper, saying that what you'd do if, I don't know, a meteorite landed in the middle of the field, you know, and you had to evacuate it. Crazy situation. But anyway, this was something which was brought in by central government. And I'm very, very interested in how central government seems to be making it impossible for any ordinary people to have any fun at all. You may remember, completely different audience, but there were, was it D-Day celebrations? Maybe last year sometime, I think, and people were not allowed to close the streets without it costing them so much money that they couldn't do it. What on earth is all this about? Who wants to be that safe? You know, it's really stupid to say that in order that everything must be completely safe and sanitised, we can't do anything anymore. And I think this is all part of the government plan to create a very subservient and obedient set of workers. If you have the alternative of going to a festival and making some money, earning your living, we're not talking about anything illegal here. All these people are perfectly legitimate traders, and yet, somehow or other, this is a threat. There is another aspect of the big green gathering that the government might well be interested in controlling, and that is that it's a meeting place for all those people who are really concerned about the future of our planet and how we can somehow stop the powers that be from completely annihilating it. Well, it's not the planet they'll annihilate, it's the human race, and maybe that's not such a bad thing under the circumstances, because we are poisoning the planet. We are like a parasite on the planet these days. It's terrible. It's terrible what we're doing. We're forced into doing this by a whole financial system that needs to constantly expand in order to pay interest, and this constant expansion means that we have to constantly consume, and we have to consume so much that there'll be no planet left. It's common knowledge that if we were all to consume like the West consumes, we'd need at least 3 planets to supply us our needs. Bit crazy, isn't it? We've only got the one.
Don't feel what's inside. Don't feel what's the truth.